Hello and welcome to the program. I am DEJI. Now, it's 2020, and as it is at the beginning of every new year, the government sets agenda and citizens also reel out their expectations. The year 2019 saw formulation of several government policies to bolster the economy. A new Economic Advisory Council was set up. Also, Nigeria signed the African Continental Free Trade Area to capitalize on regional and continental markets, among other things. Already, the federal government has laid the tracks for the new year by passing the 2020 budget, which is expected to manage expenses and revenue throughout the fiscal year. Let's not also forget that this administration succeeded in restoring the January to December budget cycle. In addition to that, Nigeria took a bold step by closing down its borders to control smuggling and improve the business of the local manufacturers. And President Muhammadu Buhari, in his New Year speech, assured that new opportunities would be created in agriculture, manufacturing, and other long-neglected sectors. He also said the country would realize increased value from oil and gas in 2020. But now, let's hear from experts and see what they are projecting for the new year. Joining me on the program now to discuss this is Paul Alaje, who is a financial analyst. He joins us from Abuja. Thank you very much for joining us on the program. You look at... You look at the various indicators for Nigeria in terms of the economy. I mean, debt profile, very high, $83 billion. We're looking at, deficit in excess, deficit, of course, running very high. I'm talking about the budget deficit now, quite high. And you look at debt servicing, what we've budgeted for debt servicing is in excess of 2.3 trillion naira. You look at all of this makes now. What does 2020 hold for Nigeria?
2020, I think Nigeria should remain hopeful in spite of the fact that we have obvious challenges. When you talk about debt, it's quite huge. It's over $80 billion. And debt servicing is taking meaningful chunk of our revenue, which makes it a sunk cost in a way. And lastly, when we look at debt servicing, the debt component of the national budget, which is approximately what we will generate from crude oil, it's also very, very, very huge. And it's one that has a huge impact, negative impact, or might have negative impact on the economy. But that does not mean that we should not remain hopeful. Our argument is that we hope that 2020 government will become more innovative, and indeed those in private sector and partner in order for Nigeria to have needful infrastructure and also needful development that we crave for. My prayer or my hope is that this year we are going to see innovation in managing the economy, which means necessarily instead of going for the debt option, we might be looking at other options of equity financing, more of PPP, more public-private partnership to finance our economy and bring useful infrastructure, most needful infrastructure, and have the country develop.
One of the biggest problems we face today is the fact that you look at our revenue. Revenues are falling. How do we reverse that? Because that is just the key. A lot of people will tell you that, look, in terms of our debt to revenue, debt to GDP ratio now, it's fine. But it's the debt to revenue ratio that is the problem. And unfortunately for us, we're still seeing revenue fall.
Now, what debt to revenue is not the issue. It's an issue, but it's not the major issue. Actually, there are three laws. The first concern should be debt to GDP ratio, which is not bad at all. But when you look at debt servicing to revenue, it's completely bad shape. But the most important one is pace of debt to economic growth, that is the rate at which we borrow to GDP. That is the worst of it. Unfortunately, not so much mentioned as is being said, is being as directed to this last point. However, so let me come back to your point where you talk about revenue, debt servicing to revenue. Debt servicing is so very important for you to still remain credible to your borrowers, and to when you now look at what we generate in order for us to pay back, it's a function of vicious cycle of poverty. Economy itself is said to be over 400, close to $400 billion. But when you look at our numbers and the resources we have, we should not be doing less than $1 trillion economy. That is what we should have. And countries that are very close to our size, so a bit more than our size, but might not even have the kind of resources we have, they're already doing $1 trillion economy. What can you generate from an economy that is only $400 billion? And when you look at distribution of income, according to different authorities, starting from National Bureau of Statistics to UNDP, and even World Bank at some point, when you look at different releases we have, you see that almost half of Nigeria are living below poverty line. So you are left with the remaining half. Of the remaining half, not all of them constitute labor force. For those that constitute labor force, not all of them are fully engaged. For those that are engaged, many are on minimum wage, some are not, some are in private sector. How much money can we truly generate from this individual? Recall that the FRS boss has just been sacked, perhaps because of target issues. So what do we do? How do we make more money? If not generating more money from alternative sources, particularly other than tax, talking about crude oil. Recall that in 2013-2014, crude oil was above $100 a barrel. As we speak, it's above $60 a barrel. And that remains the major source of revenue for government, major source of revenue for expenditure for the country. And if not so much is happening to to revenue, particularly if it comes from oil, I only wonder how we are going to be able to service our debt. You know what? Our 2020 budget submitted and passed into law and signed by His Excellency Mr. President, almost all we will generate from crude oil, almost all is equivalent of what we use to service debt. So in the real sense, where is the commonwealth of the people? Where is the resources from crude oil this moment today?
I mean, we also saw the government in 2019 introduce quite a lot of measures, to boost tax revenue collection, so to speak. We saw these measures in 2018, crystallizing, of course, in 2019. But despite all the measures put in place, even the new FIRS boss has come out to say, look, tax collection now from tax revenue is seriously going down, that we're seeing a dwindling of tax collection. What exactly do you think is the problem?
The problem is that when you introduce taxes to people with high virtuous circle of poverty and low income, what you see is that less and less will remain in a job because entrepreneurs will adjust because they want to mix tax liability. It will affect labor directly. More and more people become unemployed. And you can check the figure from National Bureau of Statistics. Unemployment figure has been on the rise steadily. In fact, in spite of the situation of several efforts, government is trying to combat poverty, bringing different agricultural programs. CBN is doing its best with NPR and MPC through NPR and other rates. But it has not impacted so much in revenue because the economy structure itself is wrong. It is wrong because most of us have put so much requirement on federal government, not knowing that there are more than just one government in Nigeria. We have, in fact, 36 government plus one, which is FCT. In these various states, how many of them are truly sustainable? As we speak today, I can tell you that only 6 of these state governments are sustainable. Without federal government payment to them, when you look at component of IGR to federal allocation, you see that maybe only 2 is sustainable. So the truth is, the kind of economy we run now, we always require begging bowl. Unfortunately, begging bowl for the states where they are found also leaves.
Let's talk about recurrent expenditure now. We're still borrowing to fund recurrent expenditure, and of course, that expenditure keeps going high up. For instance, we have something from budget here which said the government spent that in terms of what is it called now? In terms of recurrent expenditure, that recorded a revenue of 3.86 trillion, but the government spent around 5.86 trillion on revenue expenditure, meaning the government basically borrowed around 2 trillion to fund its recurrent side of the budget. I'm talking about the performance of the 2019 budget now. When you continue to have this kind of situation where recurrent expenditure is going up almost on a daily basis and you're having to borrow to fund recurrent expenditure, how do we deal with this?
First of all, what we are measuring as performance is not complete performance. What we use to measure performance is money releases. Performance is execution, performance is result, and it should go beyond money releases. And it's not new now. I can tell you, since we have been following our Nigerian budget releases since 2005 to date, not so much has happened other than using money releases to agencies of government by different appropriate authorities is what we have classified as performance. But now, the question is, our 2019 budget, we have approximately 30%, 29% probably speaking, for capital expenditure and remaining to recurrent expenditure. To capital expenditure, recurrent expenditure approximately 71%, capital expenditure approximately 29%. And you also recall that 2019 budget, some of the capital project there has been rolled over to 2020 budget because the life has been cut short to make room for 2020 budget. Something that will never happen is to cut the current expenditure for capital expenditure. What's off at the end of the day is capital expenditure. And this that were not enough, what we have in 2020 budget is that, in fact, recurrent expenditure increased to 80% and capital expenditure reduced to 20%, from approximately 29-30% that it was in 2019 to about 20% that it is now. Now, what grows economy? Is it recurrent that grows economy or capital? Recurrent is called consumption in income function, and capital expenditure is called investment. So public investment is what you actually be growing. So when you look at what we have borrowed, approximately 15% when you compare it in 5 years, and our economic growth approximately 2.4%. And economics says that when your borrowing is not impacting or is not below GDP growth rate, in fact, your borrowing may not necessarily be useful. So when you look at what we borrow, and the rate at which you are borrowing is about 15%, and the GDP growth rate average is about 2.4%, you will now ask, if economists put that there as a law, would you want to encourage further borrowing? Or would you say we should do more of recurrent expenditure or capital expenditure? And when you look at the theory of investment, both public and private, while public investment has reduced according to 2020 budget from 2019 budget, and what we also have as reports coming from central bank, private investment is also shrinking. Investment in Nigeria, November report, which is foreign direct investment, has also reduced. You now wonder if truly the economy will grow. So the kind of growth we have now should not be surprising. It's a function of several investments from public to private and foreign investment. All of them almost reduce at the same time. And that is why we might be having the kind of growth we have right now. Slow growth as we have it.
Let's just quickly talk about this public-private thing we're talking. You just talked about now. In the case of Nigeria, let's look at it. Can we argue that part of the reasons why the government seems to be facing these enormous challenges now in terms of funding its budget and all of that is that the government is basically biting more than it could chew. In terms of infrastructure, for instance, wouldn't it make sense for the government, to get the private sector more involved and save itself the headache of having to provide for all the infrastructure of this country? Because bottom line is that the government has not got the money to execute all these capital projects we're talking about.
Yeah, my candid advice is that in most countries, private individuals construct road and they are concession to them, and they toll the road to generate their revenue. But because of policy inconsistent and government now changing government policy over time, what's supposed to be a continuum of government, it makes it very difficult for private investors or private individuals that would like to invest on Nigerian infrastructure that is so lucrative to put in their money, put in their fund, put in their technology, build roads for us. But what government is doing right now, particularly in a part of Lagos, Apapa Expressway, is to use tax holiday or tax receipt, credit note for private individuals who construct road and get it back over 10 years, which I think is not totally bad at all. It's not bad. It's what should be encouraged. But beyond that, we also need to make investment attractive. Those who want to invest their money directly on our loan without even using our taxes. They can invest and government goes back and still collect taxes from them, which means it's more expansionary, in fact, than for them to reduce taxation from source and want them to construct road. So while we are doing that, we can add another policy to it for those who wants to invest privately. Why government could use revenue generated from taxation, among other sources, and invest in rural area or support government or give that that support, moral support to state and local government to invest in rural community. Because when you do this, we can also capture most of the informal sector that is not recorded on economy outlook and see how much of them we can cover and also measure Nigerian growth properly.
If you were talking to the new head of the FIRS, what would you be telling him in terms of what he needs to do, to push up government revenue?
First, congratulations to the new FIRS boss. I would want him to perhaps adopt a new policy or a different policy that worked before, which could be try to further expand tax bracket by bringing a reintroduce amnesty program for those who do not take part of that, and also proper enlightenment program. A lot of people don't really understand what taxation is about. A lot of people are afraid, a lot of people are concerned, but with proper enlightenment and still helping government to generate revenue, I think when you combine these two, it will be becoming more acceptable to people who perhaps don't know that it's a responsibility for them to pay taxes.
And what do you think should be done to government agencies? Because it's very rampant. We saw that in the 2017 audit report, and it is very rampant. Tax authorities are complaining that government agencies are collecting taxes, but they are not remitting them.
Well, it's horrible, it's saddening that government agencies collect taxes and they are not remitting them. I think government may need to make sample of those who have been found wanting. Government have respective tools and agencies that can help to do that. By the time sample is made out of those who have collected revenue have not remitted them, at that time I'm sure that it will forestall others from doing similar things. But I can also tell you that there are a number of agencies that also collect revenue, but getting running costs from government become an issue. So for us to discourage it, we may also need to now work internally as government and agencies of government, so that there is particular sources of revenue that comes to them, and auditors can go out after that and see if that's been properly taken care of.
What would be your final word now on as far as 2020 is concerned?
Oh, okay, so 2020 is a fresh year, is another opportunity for us, for Nigerians and indeed our government to right wrongs and to compliment on good things that has been done in 2019. And I strongly believe that no other person will come fix our country for us. It is us by asking the right question and government providing right economic answer. Thank you so very much. Happy New Year and compliments of the season, Nigeria.
Happy New Year indeed, and thank you very much for your time. We'll take a short break now and we'll be right back. On DEJI 360, we don't just ask the questions. What is wrong with amending the Constitution the way the National Assembly members have been doing it? We seek answers.
Constitution is constituent.
Our problem is not lack of laws. Our problem is lack of the willpower to implement our laws.
Answers that provide clarity.
While we negotiate, we should try to make it a point that the girls must be complete.
The clarity you need to make informed judgment so that you can make the right decision and take action. People are saying it is you politicians that are responsible for this, that you are the reason why this is happening.
All these dollars that call themselves governors in this country.
I wish we had people like Tony at the National Assembly.
God forbid that I go to join that band.
DEJI 360, providing clarity to issues.